Subscribe to Cheating Tales Lab for more original and exclusive stories. We hope you enjoy this one. Let's begin. Jake Morrison, a dedicated 38-year-old middle school math teacher, pulled his car into the pickup lane at Oak Ridge Middle School. The crisp autumn air nipped at his face as he scanned the crowd of chattering preteens for his son. Ethan, his son, trudged towards the car, head down, shoulders slumped. Jake's brow furrowed. This wasn't like his usually talkative and exuberant son. "Hey, buddy," Jake called as Ethan climbed into the passenger seat. "How was school?" Ethan mumbled something unintelligible and turned to stare out the window. In the rear-view mirror, Jake caught a glimpse of reddened eyes and tear-stained cheeks. His concern deepened. The drive home was uncharacteristically quiet. Normally, Ethan would be regaling Jake with tales of his day. Who said what in homeroom, the latest middle school drama, his triumphs and tribulations in pre-algebra. Today, nothing. Jake pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home. Before Ethan could bolt for his room, Jake placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Hey," he said softly. "What's going on, kiddo? You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Ethan's lower lip trembled. For a moment, Jake thought he might open up, but then the boy shook his head and darted inside. Jake sighed, following his son into the house. He found Ethan curled up on the living room couch, looking small and vulnerable. "Ethan," Jake said, sitting beside him, "please tell me what's wrong. I can't help if I don't know what's going on." Finally, Ethan broke down. Through his tears, he revealed the cruel taunts he'd been enduring at school. Kids calling him the milkman's son, saying he didn't look like Jake. Jake felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He struggled to keep his face neutral, not wanting to betray the sudden, irrational surge of doubt that flooded his mind. "Who's saying these things?" he managed to ask. "It started with Tommy Peterson," Ethan sniffled. He said he heard his dad talking about our family. And then he told everyone, and now they won't stop. Jake's mind raced. Mr. Peterson, their next-door neighbor. The guy was always a bit of a blowhard, but this was crossing a line. Struggling to maintain his composure, Jake pulled Ethan into a fierce hug. "Listen to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't care what anyone says. You are my son. I love you more than anything in this world. Nothing will ever change that. You understand?" Ethan nodded against Jake's chest, his sobs slowly subsiding. "I'm going to take care of this," Jake promised, his mind already formulating plans to address the situation with the school and possibly confront Mr. Peterson. "Those kids won't bother you anymore." As he held his son, Jake couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. He had some serious questions for Sarah when she got home. The evening dragged on interminably. Jake sat at the kitchen table, a stack of ungraded math tests before him. He glanced at the clock for what felt like the 100th time. 11:47 p.m. Sarah's work meeting was running late. Again. Finally, the front door creaked open. Jake's head snapped up as Sarah stumbled in, her designer clothes slightly askew. Even from across the room, Jake could smell the unmistakable mix of expensive cologne and alcohol. Sarah, a 36-year-old freelance graphic designer, kicked off her heels with a groan. "Hey, honey," she slurred. "Sorry I'm late. Big project? You know how it is." Jake set down his pen deliberately. "We need to talk." Something in his tone must have cut through Sarah's inebriated haze. She paused, one hand on the banister. "What's wrong?" Jake stood, crossing his arms. "There are rumors going around Ethan's school. Rumors about our family." Sarah's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind where kids are calling our son the milkman's kid," Jake said, his voice low and controlled. "The kind where Tommy Peterson is telling everyone Ethan doesn't look like me because he overheard his father talking about us." Sarah laughed, the sound brittle and forced. "That's ridiculous. Kids say stupid things all the time. Don't tell me you're actually worried about this." Jake studied his wife's face, the woman he'd loved for 15 years, the mother of his child. She'd never looked more like a stranger. "I want the truth, Sarah. All of it." Sarah's demeanor shifted abruptly. The mask of drunken dismissiveness fell away, replaced by a cold, calculating look that sent a chill down Jake's spine. "The truth." Sarah's lips curled into a sneer. "You want the truth, Jake? Fine. Let me show you the truth." She stormed past him, heading for her home office. Jake followed, a sense of dread growing with each step. Sarah yanked open the drawer of her sleek, modern desk. The lock clicked open. Jake hadn't even known there was a lock. She pulled out a manila folder and thrust it at his chest. "There's your precious truth," she spat. "Happy now?" Jake's hands trembled as he opened the folder. His eyes scanned the contents, struggling to make sense of the medical jargon. But 3 words stood out in stark relief. Negative paternity match. The room spun. Jake gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "How long?" he managed to choke out. Sarah laughed, the sound devoid of any warmth. "How long have I known? Or how long have you been living a lie?" Jake's knuckles whitened on the desk. "Both." "I've known since before Ethan was born," Sarah said, her voice dripping with disdain. "As for you, well, let's just say your whole life has been a lie, Jake. You're shooting blanks. You couldn't father a child if your life depended on it." The words hit Jake like physical blows. He staggered back, collapsing into Sarah's ergonomic office chair. Jake's mind reeled as he struggled to process Sarah's cruel revelation. But the nightmare was far from over. "Who?" he whispered, dreading the answer. Sarah rolled her eyes. "Does it matter? It could be any number of men. I have a thriving business, you know, much more lucrative than your pathetic teacher's salary." Jake's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" A cruel smile played across Sarah's lips. "Oh, honey, did you really think my graphic design business was doing that well? You never questioned where all the money was coming from." As Sarah spoke, the pieces started falling into place. The late nights, the business trips, the designer clothes and exotic vacations that always seemed just a bit out of their price range. Jake couldn't bring himself to say it. "An escort," Sarah finished for him. "A damn good one, too. High-end clients, very exclusive. Your neighbor, Mr. Peterson, he's small potatoes compared to some of the men I've been with." Jake felt like he might be sick. How many?" Sarah shrugged, examining her manicured nails. "I lost count years ago. But don't worry, I've always been very careful. Well, except for that one time." She gestured vaguely towards the DNA results still clutched in Jake's hand. "You've been lying to me for our entire marriage," Jake said, his voice hollow. "Stealing from our accounts. Cheating with God knows how many men." "Please," Sarah scoffed. "I haven't stolen a dime. Every penny I've earned. Unlike you, with your sad little paychecks. Do you have any idea how boring it's been playing house with you all these years?" As the argument escalated, Sarah's drunken state seemed to fuel her cruelty. She boasted about her successful business, mocking Jake's modest teacher salary and the life they built together. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but a small sound from the hallway stopped him cold. Both he and Sarah turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway, eyes wide with shock and brimming with tears. "Mom!" Ethan's voice was barely audible. "Dad!" Before either of them could react, Ethan turned and fled. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. "Ethan!" Jake called, springing to his feet. He glared at Sarah, who had the decency to look slightly ashamed as the gravity of her drunken confessions sank in. "We're not finished," Jake growled. Torn between comforting his son and dealing with his wife, Jake made his choice. He raced after Ethan, leaving Sarah alone in the house, her carefully constructed web of lies unraveling around her. As Jake's footsteps faded into the night, Sarah collapsed onto the couch, the full weight of her actions crashing down around her. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there would be no going back. The pale light of dawn crept through the windows as Sarah stirred on the couch, groaning softly. Her eyes fluttered open, Confusion etched across her face as she struggled to piece together the events of the previous night. Jake, who had spent the night consoling a distraught Ethan, watched from the kitchen doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Morning," he said evenly. "Rough night." Sarah winced, pressing a hand to her forehead. "God, my head. What happened?" Jake's grip on his coffee mug tightened imperceptibly. "You had a bit too much at your work thing. I got you some water and aspirin." As Sarah mumbled her thanks and shuffled to the bathroom, Jake's mind raced. Her memory lapse was unexpected, but it could work to his advantage. He needed time to gather evidence, to build an ironclad case. Once he heard the shower running, Jake sprang into action. He moved swiftly through the house, gathering bank statements, credit card bills, and Sarah's laptop. Anything that might hold a clue to the extent of her deception. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from Melissa Chun, the private investigator he'd contacted in the early hours of the morning. "Can meet at 2 p.m. Discrete location sent separately. Bring all relevant documents." Jake exhaled slowly. It was really happening. He was investigating his own wife, the mother of his child. By the time Sarah emerged, dressed for another day of her graphic design work, Jake had his game face on. He played the role of concerned but oblivious husband perfectly, asking about her plans for the day and mentioning offhand that Ethan wasn't feeling well and would stay home from school. As soon as Sarah left, Jake was on the phone with his college friend and lawyer, Michael Reeves. "Mike, I need your help," Jake said, his voice tight. "It's about divorce proceedings and securing custody of Ethan." Michael's response was immediate and supportive. "I'm here for you, Jake. Let's meet and go over everything." Over the next few days, Jake worked tirelessly. He met with Melissa, providing her with every scrap of information he could find on Sarah's activities. The private investigator set to work tracking Sarah's movements and compiling a client list. Jake also began setting up hidden cameras and audio devices around the house, his stomach churning at the necessity of such deception. But he needed evidence, and this was the only way to get it. In between his clandestine activities, Jake had several recorded conversations with Sarah, where she unwittingly admitted to her actions while sober. Each admission was like a knife to his heart, but Jake steeled himself, knowing it was all necessary for what was to come. Simultaneously, Jake opened a separate bank account and began quietly transferring his legitimate earnings. He couldn't risk Sarah emptying their joint accounts once she realized he was onto her. As the evidence mounted, Jake felt a sense of purpose settling over him. Jake arrived at Oak Ridge Middle School on Monday morning to find the parking lot abuzz with activity. Teachers huddled in small groups, their faces etched with concern. As he approached the main entrance, he spotted Principal Evelyn Walsh, engaged in a heated discussion with Superintendent Richard Grayson. "Jake," Evelyn called, beckoning him over. "We need to talk." Jake's stomach dropped as Evelyn outlined the crisis. Severe budget cuts across the district threatened everyone's job security. Programs were on the chopping block, teaching positions in jeopardy. "We need to show improvement in our test scores," Evelyn explained, her eyes darting nervously to Superintendent Grayson. "Significant improvement. Quickly." Jake's brow furrowed. "But the quarterly assessments aren't for another month. How can we possibly?" "We need you to adjust some of the data from last year," Grayson cut in, his voice low and urgent. "Nothing drastic, just enough to show an upward trend." Jake stared at them, uncomprehending. "You want me to falsify student records?" Evelyn winced at his blunt phrasing. "Think of it as creative data interpretation. For the good of the school, Jake. For your students." Jake's mind reeled. Was this really happening? First Sarah's betrayal, and now this? "I can't do that," he said firmly. "It's wrong. It's illegal, and it does nothing to actually help our students." Grayson's face darkened. "Mr. Morrison, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. Your job, everyone's jobs, are on the line here." Jake straightened, meeting the superintendent's gaze unflinchingly. "Then fire me. but I won't be part of this. He turned on his heel and strode into the building, leaving a sputtering Grayson and a conflicted Evelyn in his wake. As he reached his classroom, Jake's hand shook slightly as the full impact of what he'd done hit him. He'd just put his career on the line. With everything else going on in his personal life, he might have just committed professional suicide. Meanwhile, Sarah, completely unaware of Jake's knowledge, continued her deception. She breezily informed Jake of a weekend business trip to meet a new, high-profile client. It's a potentially huge account, she gushed. If I land this, we could be looking at a serious upgrade to our lifestyle. Jake nodded, keeping his expression neutral even as his mind raced. This was exactly the kind of lead Melissa had been waiting for. As soon as Sarah left, Jake contacted Melissa. Within hours, she had a startling update. "Jake, we've identified Sarah's new client," Melissa said. "It's Victor Rossi. On the surface, he's a charismatic businessman, but my sources say he's got ties to a dangerous criminal organization. Money laundering, extortion, you name it." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. "Are you saying Sarah's involved with the mob?" "I don't think she knows," Melissa replied. "Rossi's careful about keeping his less savory activities under wraps. But Jake, this complicates things. Exposing Sarah's activities could potentially put her in harm's way." Jake sat heavily in his chair, the weight of this new information crushing down on him. He was faced with a moral dilemma he never could have anticipated. How could he protect Ethan and seek justice without potentially endangering Sarah's life? As he grappled with this impossible situation, Jake realized that the stakes had just gotten exponentially higher. Whatever he decided to do next would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Over the next few days, Jake threw himself into formulating a plan. He knew he needed to expose Sarah's activities, not just to their family and community, but to the authorities as well. But he had to do it in a way that wouldn't tip off Rossi or his criminal associates. After careful consideration, Jake decided to start by anonymously tipping off Detective Laura Hawkins, an ambitious local cop he'd read about in the paper. He crafted a carefully worded email hinting at Sarah's connection to Councilman James Hartford's recent scandal. Next, Jake focused on protecting Ethan from the impending fallout. He called his parents, spinning a tale about a special grandfather-grandson project that would require Ethan to stay with them for a while. It wasn't a complete lie. Jake did want Ethan to spend more time with his grandparents, especially now. As Jake worked, he discovered that Sarah and Victor were planning to attend a high-profile charity gala. Many of Sarah's clients would be present, making it the perfect opportunity to expose her double life. Jake spent hours preparing a digital presentation, compiling irrefutable evidence of Sarah's activities. Financial records, recorded conversations, client lists, everything Melissa had uncovered went into the file. All the while, Jake continued to play the role of oblivious husband. He nodded absently when Sarah mentioned the gala, feigning disinterest in the boring charity thing. He even helped her pick out a dress, swallowing his disgust as she preened in front of the mirror. "You sure you don't want to come?" Sarah asked, adjusting her jewelry. "It could be fun." Jake shook his head, forcing a rueful smile. "You know those fancy parties aren't my scene. Besides, I've got a stack of tests to grade. You go, have a good time." As Sarah left for the gala, Jake felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Anger, certainly, grief for the life he thought he'd had, but mostly a determination to see this through to the end. He checked his watch. In just a few hours, he would set his plan in motion. Sarah's carefully constructed world of lies and deceit would come crashing down around her, and Jake would be there to witness every moment of it. The Grand Plaza Hotel gleamed like a jewel in the night, its facade awash with twinkling lights and the constant flash of camera bulbs. Oak Ridge's elite streamed through the doors, decked out in their finest for the annual community charity gala. Jake Morrison adjusted his tie, feeling distinctly out of place in his rented tuxedo. As he approached the entrance, he felt the weight of the concealed recording device pressing against his chest. The grand ballroom was a sea of glittering gowns and polished shoes. Jake's eyes scanned the crowd, finally landing on Sarah. She looked stunning in a form-fitting red dress, her hair swept up in an elegant updo. With practiced casualness, Jake began to mingle. He recognized many of the attendees from Sarah's client list, men who had no idea their dirty little secrets were about to be aired in the most public way possible. "Jake, is that you?" He turned to see Margaret Chun, wife of the police chief, eyeing him with surprise. "Mrs. Chun." Jake greeted her warmly. "Lovely event, isn't it?" "Indeed," she replied, her gaze drifting to where Sarah stood, laughing with a group of men. "Though I must say, I'm surprised to see you here without your wife." Jake leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I'm a bit surprised myself. There have been some strange goings-on lately, but I'm sure it's nothing." He moved on before Margaret could press for details, knowing he'd planted a seed of curiosity that would soon bloom into full-blown scandal. Across the room, Jake spotted Councilman James Hartford, his florid face flushed with what looked like more than just alcohol. Sarah was at his elbow, whispering something that made the councilman's eyes dart nervously around the room. A ripple went through the crowd as a new arrival commanded everyone's attention. Victor Rossi strode into the ballroom, his powerful presence drawing all eyes. Jake watched as Sarah's face lit up, her body language shifting subtly as she excused herself from Hartford and made her way towards Rossi. Jake's jaw clenched. It was time to accelerate his plan. He made his way to where Timothy Walsh, a local journalist known for his salacious exposés, was hovering near the bar. "Mr. Walsh," Jake said, clapping the man on the shoulder. "Just the person I wanted to see. I've got a story that might interest you. It involves a certain councilman, a high-end escort ring, and enough blackmail material to keep you in headlines for months." Walsh's eyes gleamed with interest. "Is that so, Mr. Morrison? And where might one find evidence of such outrageous claims?" Jake smiled tightly. "Oh, I think you'll find it's about to become very public indeed." As Jake worked the room, dropping calculated hints and innuendos, he could see the atmosphere beginning to shift. Whispers and suspicious glances spread like wildfire. More than once, he caught Sarah's eye across the room, her confident smile faltering slightly as she noticed the strange undercurrent in the crowd. Jake checked his watch. It was almost time. He made his way towards the stage, his heart pounding in his chest. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd uncovered, it all came down to this moment. As he climbed the steps to the podium, Jake caught sight of a familiar face near the back of the room. Detective Laura Hawkins, dressed to blend in with the crowd, gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Jake took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. Sarah's world was about to come crashing down around her, and he was the one holding the wrecking ball. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake's voice rang out across the ballroom, "if I could have your attention, please." The crowd quieted, all eyes turning towards the stage. Jake could see Sarah in the back, her brow furrowed in confusion. "As you know, this gala is all about charity and community," Jake continued, his finger hovering over the remote in his pocket. "So in that spirit, I'd like to make an announcement about a significant donation." He pressed a button. The large screen behind him flickered to life, displaying a series of damning financial records and transcripts. "My wife, Sarah Morrison, has been running quite a charitable organization of her own," Jake said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Though I don't think the IRS would approve of her particular brand of giving." A gasp rippled through the crowd as the implications of Jake's words and the evidence on the screen sank in. For years, Sarah has been operating as a high-end escort, servicing many of the fine gentlemen in this very room, Jake continued, his eyes scanning the sea of shocked faces. "But that's not all. She's also been embezzling funds, blackmailing clients, and generally making a mockery of everything this community stands for." The screen changed, now playing a recorded confession from Sarah herself. Her voice, slightly slurred but unmistakable, filled the stunned silence of the ballroom. Jake watched as Sarah's face drained of color. She turned, trying to push her way through the crowd towards the exit, but found her path blocked by shocked and angry attendees. Suddenly, a commotion near the bar drew everyone's attention. Victor Rossi, his face contorted with rage, was shoving people aside as he made his way toward Sarah. "You stupid bitch," he snarled, grabbing Sarah's arm roughly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The mask of the charming businessman was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Sarah's eyes widened in fear as she realized the true nature of the man she'd been dealing with. Just as Rossi raised his hand, another figure burst through the crowd. Detective Laura Hawkins, badge now prominently displayed, inserted herself between Rossi and Sarah. "That's enough," Hawkins barked, her hand on her concealed weapon. "Victor Rossi, you're under arrest for assault, racketeering, and a whole host of other charges will be sorting out down at the station." As Hawkins cuffed the sputtering Rossi, Jake's attention was drawn to a commotion near the buffet table. Councilman Hartford had collapsed, clutching his chest. People were shouting for a doctor, the stress of the evening apparently too much for the politician's heart. In the chaos that followed, Jake made his way down from the stage. He found Sarah standing alone, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "Jake," she whispered, reaching out to him. "Please, I can explain." Jake stepped back, out of her reach. "Save it for your lawyer, Sarah. It's over." As the police began to arrive in force, Jake felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. The truth was out. Justice would be served. And though the road ahead would be difficult, he knew he'd made the right choice. For Ethan, for himself, and for all the other victims of Sarah's deception. The weeks following the gala passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media frenzy, and emotional turmoil. Jake found himself at the center of a storm, but he weathered it with a strength he didn't know he possessed. Sarah faced a barrage of charges: fraud, blackmail, tax evasion. The evidence Jake had gathered, combined with the testimony of her former clients, left little room for doubt. As he sat in the courtroom, watching his wife of 15 years being led away in handcuffs, Jake felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief, certainly. Anger, still simmering beneath the surface. But mostly, a profound sadness for what might have been. The family court case was next. Jake presented his evidence methodically, painting a clear picture of Sarah's unfit parenting and financial misconduct. When the judge awarded him full custody of Ethan, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They could start to heal now, to rebuild their life together. Surprisingly, Jake managed to protect most of their assets from Sarah's creditors. His foresight in opening separate accounts and documenting every transaction paid off, ensuring that he and Ethan wouldn't be left destitute by Sarah's crimes. But the repercussions of that fateful night weren't confined to Jake's personal life. The scandal had sent shockwaves through the entire community, toppling pillars of society like dominoes. Superintendent Richard Grayson was one of the first to fall. His involvement in the data falsification scheme came to light during the investigation into Sarah's activities. Jake found himself hailed as a whistleblower, his refusal to compromise his integrity now seen as an act of heroism rather than insubordination. The school board, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, approached Jake with an offer he never saw coming. "We'd like you to consider taking on the role of Vice Principal of Curriculum Development," Board President Elaine Hodges said, her eyes serious behind horn-rimmed glasses. "Your dedication to educational integrity is exactly what this district needs right now." Jake was stunned. I don't know what to say." Elaine smiled. "Say yes, Jake. Help us rebuild trust in this community." After careful consideration, Jake accepted the position. It would be a challenge, but one he was ready to face head-on. As the dust began to settle, Jake found himself with an unexpected calling. He started a support group for other victims of infidelity and financial abuse, using his own experience to help others rebuild their lives. Their first meeting was held in the community center, a small group of shell-shocked individuals drawn together by shared pain. As Jake looked around the room, he saw reflections of his own journey. The anger, the confusion, the tentative hope for a better future. "I know it feels like the world has ended," Jake said, his voice soft but firm. "But I promise you, there is life after betrayal. We're going to get through this together." The hardest part of all was helping Ethan come to terms with the truth about his parentage. The boy had been devastated by the revelations at the gala, withdrawing into himself in a way that broke Jake's heart. On the recommendation of Ethan's school counselor, they started seeing a family therapist, Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman with a gentle manner, helped them navigate the treacherous waters of their new reality. "Ethan," she said in one of their sessions, "can you tell me how you're feeling about everything that's happened?" Ethan, slumped in his chair, shrugged. "I don't know. Confused, I guess. Angry. Sad." He looked up at Jake, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't even know if I should call you Dad anymore." Jake felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He leaned forward, taking Ethan's hands in his own. "Listen to me, Ethan. I have been your father every day since you were born. I've loved you, cared for you, watched you grow. Biology doesn't change that. As far as I'm concerned, you are my son in every way that matters." Slowly, painstakingly, they began to rebuild their relationship. There were setbacks. Days when Ethan would lash out in anger, nights when Jake would lie awake wondering if he was doing enough. But there were victories, too. The first time Ethan laughed freely again. The day he asked Jake for help with his math homework, just like old times. As summer turned to fall, Jake made a decision. They needed a fresh start, away from the whispers and sidelong glances of a town that knew too much of their business. They found a modest house in a nearby town, close enough that Jake could commute to his new job, but far enough to feel like a new beginning. As they unpacked boxes in their new home, Jake felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in months. On their first night in the new house, Jake tucked Ethan into bed, just as he had when Ethan was small. "Dad," Ethan said softly as Jake turned to leave. "Yeah, buddy." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then met Jake's eyes. "You know you'll always be my real dad, right? No matter what." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling Ethan into a fierce hug. "I love you, son," he whispered. "Always have, always will." Father and son, bound not by blood but by something far stronger, love, trust, and the unbreakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. Jake Morrison, once a simple math teacher, now stood at the threshold of a new life. He had lost much, it was true, but he had gained something precious too. The knowledge of his own strength, the love of his son, and the chance to build a future on a foundation of truth and integrity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jake knew he was ready to face them. For himself, for Ethan, and for the man he had become through this crucible of betrayal and redemption. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.